Good afternoon, everyone. This is something that is a long time in coming. I wasn't able to do it until now. So I greet you anywhere and everywhere in the world to share with you the story of my 8.5 years in Italy. 8.5 years of what I thought was going to be really forever, because my dream for years and years and years was to bring bel canto to the crib, the culla of the voice Italy. So the story begins in 1982. And I lived in Italy and worked in Italy and did 150 million things that were wonderful and great in Italy until the moment when basically I was threatened. And I don't want to go into that story at all, but I was told everything will stop for you because I didn't accept working for somebody instead of keeping my own company that at that time took me 8.5 years to build. And I was told, well, if you don't go away or if you try to stay, we will stop you anyway. So basically, in 1989-90, came the move to Budapest. And those were 2.5 years of horror. Even though in those 2.5 years, I did some marvelous things. And also that I really don't want to go into. Then I got an invitation from the Ministry of Culture to Kiev. And they moved me to Kiev, me and my paintings and my records. Another big move. Then after 2.5 years of going Kiev, Mexico, the States back to Kiev, my mother became very ill. And on my way back from Mexico, my daughter then told me that my mother was extremely ill and had a triple bypass. So I stayed in the States. I was ready to go and leave back to Kiev, where I loved being, where my career and my work and everything that I could possibly want was there for me. And when I was just about ready to leave again, to go back to Kiev, I received a phone call that my daughter was terminal, that she had 4 months to live. So I stayed again in the States, stayed in Florida, be with my mother, tried to get my things out of Kiev, couldn't get my money. So I went back, got my paintings, got my books and my records, came back to the States, began a whole new life with practically nothing. My student from Mexico informed his maestro in Miami that I was there, and so everything began to move again in the States. Then from Hollywood, I moved to Plantation. My daughter passed away, Aleh Shalom, on Thanksgiving Day, 1996. And then came a move, very, very important, because I was in the movement, really, of teshuvah, of returning to becoming orthodox again, the way basically I was from the time I was very little, got pulled off the way, came back. And so in 2006, actually 4, but altogether in 6, I moved to Crown Heights, lived in Crown Heights until 2010, was very, very, very ill, had to go to South America to get internal immunoglobulins, going back and forth every 3-4 months. Then it became necessary to be there every month. I couldn't do it, so made another container, went to Montevideo, bought a house in Montevideo, stayed in Montevideo 2.5 years, needed to go to Israel. So in 2010, left Montevideo. There's a big story in between. Went to Israel, lived in Israel in Tzfat from 2000 to 2013, was very, very, very ill. Was told that I had to leave Tzfat. It was too high for me. Came to Tiberias, stayed in Tiberias until 2016. And there, the story really begins. My Italian experience again, because Italy is part of my essence. And I found again in Italy the place where it all began. And that is Bova Marina, Parco Archioderi, the synagogue built in the 1400s. And there I found the piece of my soul that was so powerful to bring me back, really bring me back to that place and the city 40 kilometers, 45 kilometers away, Reggio Calabria. So Bova Marina happened on the first big trip that I made from Israel to Reggio Calabria, where I was invited to do actually it wasn't Reggio that invited me, it was Città that invited me to come with my Torah and open it, teach from it, with an introductory level of Rav Shmuel Eliyahu, chief rabbi of Tzfat, one of the chief rabbis, one of the biggest rabbis in Israel, and one of the members of the rabbinate in Jerusalem. And he basically, in his introduction to me, or for me, wrote, open, teach, and bring back this, bring back home the sparks that were left during the Inquisition in the 1400s. There are probably many, many Jewish souls, and some of those I had the privilege of meeting in Calabria, who are hidden and just very quietly and secretly reveal that there may be memories inside them that make them look for and search for a Jewish identity and a Jewish heritage, but that's not for publication. That's very, very private. And slowly they begin arriving at my doorstep. And of course, others that are simply interested in what this Jewish woman, Orthodox Jewish woman, alone in a city, in a region that has absolutely nothing to offer her as far as the Jewish community is concerned, as far as kashrut, kosher living is concerned. What is she doing with a Torah in this area, looking not openly, but doing her own work and being open to sharing with whoever wants, whoever wishes, whoever is interested, her culture, her knowledge, her home with others that basically have nothing to do with her except be interested and not looking for anything, not money, not basically nothing, just being there and sharing what it is that they might be interested in knowing. So between 2016 and 2018, I was going back and forth and back and forth. And I said, well, I'll stay 3 months and then I'll go back, and then I'll stay another 3 months and then I'll go back. And it became obvious that I felt marvelous. I found a piece of my soul, and I was happy, very, 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 extremely happy. My phone is shut off. I have no clue why it's calling me. As usual, it's interrupting the flow when I don't want it. So in 2018, I made my 12th container, and I said, I'm going to stay. I gave away a lot because the apartment that I had was furnished very nicely. And there I began my real Italian experience again. And, you know, it seemed like that was going to be my way, my mission, my work. Obviously, my students from all over the world came to Reggio, came to learn, loved the place. I found extraordinarily marvelous people, friendships. I felt very, very much part of the society, very much part of a home. I moved again to another apartment. I really built a stupendous room on my balcony, on my terrace. The terrace was 155 meters. And I built an extraordinarily beautiful room that was going to be open to the public, of course, that was going to invite authors and artists and writers and poets and to share their knowledge and their wisdom and their art with others. And that was going to be it. 5 years ago, I wanted, and this was something that was very, very dear to me, I wanted to create a competition for the poetry of the Shoah. And I was told, it's not possible. You can't do this in Reggio Calabria. I said, yes, I can. And basically alone with a few people who believed in the project, spurring me on to go for it, I did. I went for it. I paid for it. I worked for it. I put my heart and my soul into it, and it was marvelous. I published the first edition of the award ceremony, the poems that won hundreds of poets that came to write about the Shoah, about the pain, about the horror. I went to schools. I talked about my life as second generation. I gave 100%. The first award ceremony was during COVID, and it didn't stop us. It didn't stop me, and it didn't stop the people that were around and that were supporting what I was doing. And this went on for 5 years, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of poets. Bova, the upstairs Bova. Then when I think about it, okay, where I've been and what I've done, I get extremely, extremely nostalgic, because every single place that opened its doors, every single place that gave space for this particular work, every school that invited me, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of children and young people that I spoke to about what it means to be second generation, what it means to have a history such as mine, what it means to have grown up in post-war Germany with parents who were survivors of concentration camps, Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen, of growing up until I was 16 in post-war Germany. And the response and the reaction of the students and of the children and of the young people, 16, 17, 18, the tears, the questions, the openness, the understanding, the understanding more than anything else, the hearing truth from someone whose family actually went through this, someone that actually lived with and was educated by and heard from firsthand everything. Firsthand friends of my families, survivors who came to my father to be helped to come to Israel, looking for their relatives who were all murdered. There was an affinity between us. There was a knowing and an understanding between us that, yes, I was different from them, but we had something grand in common, and that was feeling and understanding of each other and wanting something, and that was peace. And then I became ambassador of peace from the Universal Peace Federation in Italy. And all of the things that I did were always co-sponsored by the Universal Peace Federation. And awards were given by the Universal Peace Federation to poets that were chosen by the judges, not me, but by the judges of the competition. My vice president for the first 4 years was an excellent poet, an excellent personality that I met right at the beginning of my my second Italian experience, Antonella da Finotti, who was very, very helpful in guiding and finding other people that were willing and ready to associate themselves with the competition. And here really the story begins just at the beginning to unfold, that from the time that I got there, the Jewish community in Rome and all over Italy never participated in anything that I did. If anything, tried to stop and interfere with what I did, even though I invited them, and even though I opened the door and wished so much for them to be part of this work. And basically what I received from the beginning is a very, very, very different response than what I ever expected. And of course, the most difficult thing for me to accept right from the beginning was the negating of the Jewish community, and especially Rome, to anything that I offered and that I wanted to do. The community that is responsible for the southern part of Italy is Naples. And from the very first competition, they tried to interfere very negatively. And at the end of the day, I managed to get out of this, and I managed to create a bridge between the community, the Jewish community of Naples, and the region of Calabria. It took a lot, but there was a rabbi that was a great deal of help to me, and that was Rabbi Ariel Finzi, who tried in many ways to create a togetherness, whereas the person who was the representative of the Jewish community in Rome, the UCEI, the UJ, wanted absolutely nothing to do with anything that I did and tried to stifle every single thing that I did, to the point where, from a political point of view, it became extremely, extremely difficult. And the interference of the negative into the competition really left me very, very sad to begin with, obviously very sad. But this person and his various political partners made my life for the whole time that I was in Italy very, very, very difficult, and did not allow me to get much, much more support than I actually got. And that was painful, but I didn't allow it to interfere with where I wanted to go. And the story continued. The first competition, the second, the third, the fourth. And the fourth competition was marvelous. It was in Palmi. And there were more than 250 people at the presentation of, obviously, the poetry, the poets, and also the fourth edition of Solo le farfalle sono libere, only butterflies are free, which is the name of the book that I published every year with the winning poetries and the various comments of the judges. And in the fourth edition, there is even a comment by the chief rabbi. There is a comment in Rome, Rabbi Disegni, who wrote something. Then there is a comment by the ambassador of Israel. The embassy, the Israeli embassy, was really cut off for me by, let's say, whoever, but I couldn't get near it, even as an Israeli citizen, even as a Jew, even for the non-political but cultural things that I tried to do. I couldn't get any kind of support from the embassy, except for the first competition, because there was somebody who really tried very, very hard to open the door for me, but at the end of the day, did not succeed. The contra, the against what I was trying to do and why I was trying to do it, was interfered with on a political basis by the UJ and by the person who represents the UJ in the South. not in the sound, I have sound in my mind always, in the south, and his name is Roque Pugliese. Then there were other people that invited me to different places, and every time, wherever I went, that was always success. That was always written about, and that was always televised, and it was always written about in various articles, and he didn't like that. And UJ didn't like that because it didn't involve UJ, because UJ didn't want to be involved, and he tried to stop everything until we get to the fifth competition, which is already a year after the 7th of October. So we're talking about January 27th of this year. I promised in Palmi that I would have the competition, I would do the award ceremony in Cosenza, because the president of Italia Israele, very, very, very known and important association in Italy, Lucia De Fiore, came, was very, very desirous, extremely desirous, and said in front of the public that the next competition and the next award ceremony would be in Cosenza. And I agreed. And since in Cosenza I had no connections whatsoever, I felt that it was necessary to have a very connected person, president of Italia Israele Cosenza, extremely active everywhere, as my vice president. And so that's what I did. I informed Antonella da Finotti, of course, who has no serious contacts in Cosenza. I, who had none, except for Lucia De Fiore. So I said to her, I said, for the coming year, Lucia De Fiore for Cosenza is going to be the vice president. And that made 100% sense to everybody, because obviously the contacts that I needed politically in order to have the competition and to do what I was doing the 4 years past, there had to be somebody from Cosenza that was very well known, that was politically very connected. And so we went that way. That was a serious story. It was a serious mistake. It was a painful experience, because not that I did not realize, because in my own personal relationship with people from Reggio and from the various communities, after October 7th, I saw an immense change. Basically, the personal relationships that I had were, if not totally constricted at that point, but they were to 70%, 80% non-existent. In other words, the people that supported my work at that time before October 7th with great enthusiasm in everything that I was doing, withdrew personally, withdrew socially, and for me personally, that was an extremely difficult thing to accept, that on Shabbat, Friday night, I didn't have guests, and on Saturday, there were no lessons in my house, and that carried over to invitations that I would receive from the schools, from the institutes, conferences that I was doing all over the place. By the beginning of the second year after October 7th, there was nothing. And I was already suffering, obviously, the year after October 7th, seeing and hearing and realizing what was happening as far as social commentary. I don't have to tell you, you know very, very well. And that my personal life and my professional life and my ability to move freely within the community, my community, became extremely curtailed. After the first couple of weeks, after October 7th, I called the imam in Reggio, and I said to him, I said, look, we have to do something. We have to make a conference to make people realize that Hamas and the murderers of Hamas are not the same as the Muslims that live, the immigrants that live in the region. It's not the same thing. So we have to create. I'm ambassador of peace. It's the normal thing for me to do, is to try to establish a peaceful relationship between. And so I called him because we had done conferences together. He came to the peace dinner on the 21st of September in Reggio Calabria before the third competition, before the award ceremony of the third competition. We always started in September, and we launched with a dinner from for peace, and he was there at the Academy restaurant by an extraordinary human being and an extraordinary chef who was the only person in the whole time who actually sponsored the dinner for the competition. And there were 1,100 euros raised by the dinner, and he gave that for the competition prizes. We needed a lot more, but I didn't care. It was a marvelous gesture on his part. And so I called the imam and I said to him, we have to do something to show to the public that Muslims are not Hamas, that the people that are living in Reggio, who are of the Muslim faith, are not to be confused with Hamas murdering and October 7th and what was going on. And I wanted to organize that. And the telephone went very, very silent. And he says to me, Miriam, we can't do that. I said, well, why not? He said, because they'll cut my head off. Everybody is involved. I was completely and totally shocked. Completely shocked. I couldn't understand that. But I realized that that's where we're at. I did Cosenza. That was a huge mistake on my part. I should have realized from the first meeting of the two attaches, members of the city government, that they didn't want a big thing like I was used to doing beforehand, and that their city and their mayor, who did not respond to my letters and who did not respond to my invitation and who completely held himself away from anything to do with the competition, didn't want to give me any big space to do this. They, right from the beginning, they said, well, it's not going to be ready. Well, there is no other space. I should have realized, but I trusted my vice president to be able to pull this along and that we would gain the respect. And obviously, from all past experience, we had extraordinary relationships with the people and with the city governments, except here we did not. And we never did. Basically, we were put into the House of Culture, which did nothing completely, no advertising, no press releases, a little something on their website that got lost in the corner. I was able to invite only 99 people. They all had to be reserved. And since there were 82 prizes to be given, obviously there was no response and no going along in the city, and there was no happening other than this event that was basically maneuvered and manipulated to the point where if I didn't stand up for myself and for my competition, I would have gotten lost completely. But I didn't. And I started the competition with a prayer, with a psalm, and then I asked a priest to say the same psalm in Italian. It costs a fortune, costs a lot of money to do this, because basically all of the expenses, the prizes, the trips, the staying, the taking people for dinners was all mine. And basically, from the first dinner, which was obviously the 21st of September last year, instead of being 80, 90, 100 people like we had before, we had 22 people. So it should have, at that point, I should have realized that something was not right. But being always in the positive, I listened to people around me, of course, including my vice president. It'll be good, it'll be all right, it'll be fine, you'll see. And I tried in all ways, obviously, to do the right thing. And it was not right, and it was not good. There is, of course, a video, as I did every single year, of the entire event. And if you see it, you will see that there is something great that is missing and lacking. And this was the first time that the host city did not award me the competition in any way. Not a plaque, not a piece of paper, not even an article in the paper. Nothing, zero. The only article that came out was that I had arranged with Universal Peace Federation to award Ambassador of Peace to my vice president, who was then president of Italia Israele, but she had already dropped the Italia Israele, and she called her association by the name of Angelo De Fiore, a just one, who is obviously a member of her family, a just one recognized for his work and for his saving hundreds and hundreds of lives of the Roman Jewish community by giving passports, and he was a policeman, and the association Italia Israele was dedicated to him. But by the time we got into the second year of after October 7th, the Italia Israele was already very, very much lower on the agenda. And of course, Angelo De Fiore, who had mega reason to be honored in every way, shape, or form for what he did by Lucia De Fiore, for the marvelous work that she has done and does for his memory. But it became, as far as the competition was concerned, not a conversation. The only article that came out was that Lucia De Fiore received the honor of becoming an ambassador of peace for the Universal Peace Federation. It didn't talk about the competition. It didn't talk about the people who won. It didn't talk about the fifth edition of Solo farfalle sono libere, only butterflies are free. It didn't talk about anything else but that she received the honor of, the great honor of becoming an ambassador of peace of the Universal Peace Federation, and that obviously I was the one who suggested that. This was greatly painful for me. It was greatly painful for me. And to see that in all things, the city of Cosenza or the region of Calabria or the people, the public was in non-response. Not only that, I received a letter, or my communications director at that time was Maria Grazia Carna, a marvelous journalist, extraordinary human being, received for the invitations, obviously, that we send to every community, every Jewish community in Italy. Obviously, chief rabbi on down to everybody. We received a letter from the UJ telling me to absolutely not permit myself to do this competition, that it was the UJ who was allowed to speak and teach about the Shoah, and that the money that I was making, they wanted to know where all the money that I was making was going. In other words, it was a letter of accusation, a letter of immediate stop. And that was in September, even before, obviously before the dinner in Cosenza. And I spoke to a lawyer, and she said it was obviously a defamation of character against me. and that we should go to court. And I said, yes. And then I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I said, this is not the time to do that. We have enough problems as it is. It was just really the beginning of the public, quote unquote, vocal awareness, and the things that happened in Israel became very, very, very populist, and the pro-Palestinian movement in Israel in Italy became very, very, very much more powerful than the year before, and the atmosphere completely changed. And I went on, and there were hundreds of poems, and we had 82 prizes, and I had a lot of expense, and I realized that I had very little else, and certainly no support, if anything, great negativity against the work. But I decided not to go ahead with a trial, with a real discussion of the defamation of my character. And I let it go, and I said, okay, if they feel that way, then let them sue me. Of course, there's another rabbi at that point, another chief rabbi in Naples. Naples, since the first competition, had nothing to do with anything that I did, was not, of course, always invited, always asked to join, but basically refusing, if not openly, by just not being part of course, no UJ. But I went on, and I wasn't going to let go of the competition in any way. I suffered terribly. It was extremely painful. And after the competition, I began to realize that I wasn't being invited anymore. I wasn't doing conferences anymore. Nobody wanted to hear anything. That means the 27th of January, that the year before I had, oh my goodness, I don't remember how many. Sometimes I did 2 schools in one day, but there was no invitation at all this past year for the 5th competition. And I said, I can't live in an atmosphere like this. I was totally annihilated. I was totally desocialized. I was totally forgotten privately and professionally. Nobody was in contact with me except 3 people in Reggio. Reggio was completely out of the game. There were a few people. Obviously, there was Maria Grazia Carna, who was next to me always. There was Simona Silitano next to me always. There is Enza Crea next to me always. But there are lots and lots and lots of people that were extremely close to me for a long, long, long time that disappeared. And I'm not capable of living a life that is extra. I'm living a life, I want to live a life that is full and warm and giving, and it's not my way to be completely closed off. So I decided that I'm going to go to the States and I'm going to see how I feel about returning to the States. It was clear that I had nothing more to do in Italy. So I went to the States, and that was in many ways a very, very, very difficult experience personally in Miami, North Miami. Then I went to Brooklyn, and of course that was my territory and the Rebbe's territory, and my friends wanted me to come back to Brooklyn, willing to help me in any way, shape, or form to come back to Brooklyn, to teach again, to be involved again in the community of Chabad. And I realized what was going to be the story in America. And I said no. I was returning to Israel, and I was going to return to where I lived. I was returning home, and I was going to restart my life again and take everything that I've learned in my life to my people and use it for the good, for the sake of my people. And I felt that that was the only decision that I could make. Which brings us to today, which brings us to the reason for these conversations. I've just given you a little bit of a background. As we go on, I will become very specific about the various things that I did that were just extraordinary and kept me there thinking that I was making a contribution to my country, Israel, and for Italy, because my work, as far as the voice is concerned, as far as poetry is concerned, everything was in Italian. Basically, English stopped. Hebrew stopped. Everything stopped. Everything became Italian. My whole way of thinking. I got my food in Belgium, delivered in Italy. I got my meat in Rome from my kosher butcher, delivered in Reggio. I mean, everything was set up so I could live exactly the way I wanted to and share that life with those who wanted to be part of it. And there were lots of people. There were big feasts, there were big parties, there were big awards. There was a life that I thought was going to continue in that way, and Hashem had completely other plans for me. And it took me time. It took me 18 months before I realized that I was alone, that I was in danger, that my being and doing things would put other people in danger. And I realized that I was waiting for 8 years for a big exhibition in Rome. That exhibition was offered to me by Pagine Editori, and I was all for it, and they were doing marvelous things, and I paid them everything immediately. And then I realized, after I came back from the States in May, before the great In Piazza story in Rome began, that it was dangerous for me, dangerous for people who wanted to come. I realized that probably nobody would show up. I'm Jewish, I'm Orthodox, and I'm Israeli. 3 strikes against me, and I canceled the exhibition. And to this day, they didn't return my money. Quite a nice sum of money that I had to pay in order to get all the PR and everything that was involved in doing the exhibition. And I said that I was going to publicize what they're doing, and I am going to go into greater detail on the fact that I have not, to date, to this moment, received not even from the editor, a response to mails that I have sent to answer me and to give me back my money way before. I sent it way before I left for Israel, because I think we started this whole conversation in March for June, but that wasn't possible. Then we did November of this year, and obviously in July I left, and then November became March, so the actual exhibition should be the 6th of March. So there's lots and lots of time that they knew that I was not going to make the exhibition, and they still do not give me my money back and do not even answer my request. The idea of all of this at this point is to show you and is to share with you what 8.5 years in Italy looked like for me, how the people that were close and friends and that I considered to be supporters of my work as a vocal pedagogue, obviously, as a poet, obviously, as an ambassador of peace, obviously. And I saw all of my work basically plunge into an abyss of hatred. I will tell you more. I think for today, that's enough to give you an idea of where we're going and why I'm doing this. I'm doing this for you to understand that a tiger does not change his spots. That means all the friendship, all the openness, all the compliments, all of everything was a farce, was a fake, or not. And those who are close stopped being close because they were being afraid of being judged by others. And I believe with all of my heart that anti-Semitism is not at all anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism today is ignorance and the moda. It's in style to be in the piazza. It's in style to follow the negative. It's in style not because you know and not because there is real understanding of what historically, socially is going on, what the reality of the situation is. But we'll talk about all this as time goes on. Thank you for joining me. Please show me to others and let others join as well, share with others. I don't have a schedule because I am waiting for my container to arrive with God's help as soon as possible, and then I'll be making my home again. And so it'll curtail, obviously it'll curtail times. But on Saturday night, it's Facebook and it's Torah. It's conversations of Torah. And I hope that you'll join me. I hope that you'll comment. Comments are personal, and I want to keep it that way. I want to tell you that with it all, I love Italy. I love Italy. I respect Italy for all the great, wonderful music and voices it has donated to the world. And what my work does as far as vocal pedagogy is bring back the fact that they didn't allow me into a conservatory is another part of the story we'll talk about. But soon, in the next week or two, my new book, Aprimi il cielo, Open the Sky for Me, Open the Heavens for Me, in Italian is going to come out with, and I'm very honored, with a preface by Giuseppe Aletti, the premier editor of poetry in Italy. I'm waiting any day for being told that the book has come back from being printed and that it's going to be available. I'll let you know. But thank you again. I send always peace and love and caring and hope for peace, all places in the world. And of course, for my people in my country, Israel. We greet each other with shalom, and we say goodbye with shalom, peace.